You're listening to a bonus episode of the Afterburn podcast, where we're going to talk about how to become an Air Force officer.
Altitude.
Tower, Delaware expected to release you, runway 4 left, wind 040 at 5, clear for takeoff.
Seat tied, altimeter 0 eyes, we're clear for takeoff, clear for the airspace. Fire projector. My brand ramp curve at 354. Line set.
Viper 01, be advised the restricted area 6002 is still active.
Next picture 16, 15,000, Viper 1 targeted.
My guest today is Capt Colin Slade, who is an Air Force ROTC instructor and is the host of Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer podcast, which talks you through the process of becoming an Air Force officer, the various career fields that are available to officers out there. And I have a lot of people who ask questions of how to become a pilot. Well, the first step to becoming a pilot is to become an officer. And even if you don't become a pilot, if you can imagine a career in the civilian world, it most likely exists in the Air Force, either on the enlisted side of the house or the officer side of the house. Today, we're going to talk specifically about the three different commissioning sources: Reserve Officer Training Corps, the Air Force Academy, and Officer Training School, OTS. I decided to release this as a bonus episode because it doesn't necessarily align with the theme of my podcast thus far. However, I do think it's important information, and I get a lot of questions about how to become a pilot, how to become an officer. And even if you're not looking to join the Air Force or as something that doesn't interest you, I do think there are things inside this interview that can be applied to everyday life, that can be applied to your business, can be applied to your journey and your pursuit of your path, whatever that might be. But I'll let you be the judge of that. Hopefully, for those of you out there looking to join the military, looking to become an officer, you'll find this information useful and helpful for you as you try to go out there and walk the path. And before we get into today's podcast, wherever you're listening, please hit that subscribe button. Leave me a review. That helps me out and lets me know to keep generating content. And then finally, I'd like to thank the two sponsors for this episode, Wingman Watches and Squadron Posters. If you're looking to build a custom watch, swing over to wingmanwatch.com and get started today. They're a veteran-owned company. Everything is built right here in the USAFA. And again, small business. And at times like this, never a better opportunity to support a small business. I'd also like to thank Squadron Posters for sponsoring this episode. Squadron Posters is a great way to capture your memories and showcase the places you have traveled, where you've lived, and some of the amazing things you've accomplished. Their custom artwork is truly unique. Check out squadronposters.com and you can use the code RAIN10 to receive 10% off your order of $59 or more. And finally, I'd like to mention Jello over at the Fighter Pilot Podcast, who started a Facebook group called The Pit. And The Pit is for aspiring military aviators, and it has students going through pilot training right now, students awaiting pilot training, but a myriad of people who have flown nearly everything underneath the sun to help guide and mentor. And really, it's a great opportunity for those going through the process or have just been through the process to connect and help one another out. So check out The Pit. Again, that's hosted over on Facebook and put together by Jello at the Fighter Pilot Podcast. All right, now let's get into the episode for today with Capt Colin Slade, who is an ROTC instructor. And again, he's the host of Commissioned, the Air Force Officer Podcast. Sweet, let's get rolling. Colin, thanks for joining me on the podcast tonight. I have a lot of my Instagram followers who have a ton of questions about joining the Air Force, becoming an officer, becoming a pilot specifically, but even if not becoming a pilot, just how to join the Air Force in general, how to become an officer. Sure. A lot of my stuff, I hate to say it, I kind of cringe when they ask me about tips for the AFOQT or like applications. Like, it's nearly 2 decades since I last did that. So having you on the podcast tonight, it's great because you're going to be able to give some recent experience. Because tell me a little about who you are and what you do, because I think that's really going to help people out.
Absolutely. Yes. My name is Captain Colin Slade. I am an Air Force officer. I have been on active duty as a civil engineer and then went into the Air Force Reserve. But for the last 2.5 years, I have been an instructor for Air Force ROTC. So actually working the process of getting people into the Air Force as officers, to include being pilots or other types of rated officers.
That's awesome. So let's just kind of start at the beginning. And by the beginning, talk about a kid who is middle school, high school age, and now they're thinking, hey, I want to be a pilot. I want to be an officer. I want to be a lawyer, whatever it might be. They want to join the military and serve. What are some of the steps they need to start taking in the middle school, high school years to set them up for the next step?
Well, I want to highlight first off that you hit it right on the head, that that is the exact time and place that they should start thinking about this sort of thing. That if they want to give themselves the best possible chance of being an officer in the Air Force and getting the specific career field that they're looking for, they need to be thinking about these things while they are still in middle school and definitely while in high school. In that time period, they really need to focus on, first and foremost, their grades. Unfortunately, the Air Force is one of the few institutions on planet Earth that cares about your GPA, but for us, it is really important. We use that as one of the primary distinguishing factors across all of our selection boards. That includes scholarships, that's pilot selection, the job assignments, all of those things will take into account your GPA. So start early, start crushing it from the very beginning. And as you often say, Rain, don't bring it weak.
Yeah, there you go. So I was fortunate. I think I knew at a young age that I wanted to be a pilot. I joined the military. 9/11 happened, and it was kind of right in those formative years as far as getting set up to go into the military and go be an officer, where like it put me into gear. Like all my focus and energy went towards becoming a pilot in the Air Force specifically.
Yeah.
And I looked up what the requirements were. I sought out mentors who had walked that path before me, got their guidance, and everyone echoed like good grades, be well-rounded, be involved in clubs.
Yep.
And not just like the participation trophy, but when the involvement is, the expectation is, I guess, progression to the point where, hey, if I don't know, whatever hobby X, Y, or Z, by the time you're year 4 into that club, we're really looking for someone who has stepped up to maybe they're being the club president or something like that. So what outside of GPA do kids need to be doing in order to set them up to get a spot to join, the United States Air Force?
Yeah, so that's another really important thing that you highlighted there, is that as officers, we need to be well-rounded, and that is going to definitely include your demonstrated leadership capability. And that could be in a club, that could be in athletics, that could be in the community, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, any of those types of things where there's opportunity for you to progress in leading a team, a group of people, and take them to a point of success. So if you want to demonstrate that you are the well-rounded individual that we're looking for, we need you to seek out those opportunities for leadership and just crush it there, be successful there.
Yeah, I think what's tough is at that young age, right? I remember being in high school. You're focused on the next day. You're focused on the next week. What am I being? You're not seeing the long-term 5 years, 10 years out. And what I tell young kids is like, you think in high school that being 25 or 30 is a ways away, but it's really not. And you have such a very short runway to get things done. And unfortunately, if you waste even a semester, God forbid, you waste like a year just trying to find yourself, you're so far behind the power curve that you're going to have to work exponentially harder to catch up to those peers who kind of already knew what they wanted to go do. Not saying it's impossible, right? Like people do it, but if you're one of those people that hasn't quite figured it out and you're now in your junior year of high school, you are going to have a tougher road, I think, more times than not, to get to where you want to go. Not to discourage people, but just know that, hey, fence in, get ready for the fight and get after it. So now let's say, hey, this student, guy or gal, has been working their butt off, high school, good GPA there, and then they're well-rounded as far as like the leadership and involvement in clubs and sports. What is next? What are they looking at as far as college and some of their options and what they should be doing if they want to become an officer?
Okay. So if you want to become an officer, you have 3 options. There are 3 paths to receiving a commission. The first one that most people think of is going to be the Air Force Academy. And in order to get to the academy, you do need to start early to demonstrate that you can get the grades, that you have that leadership potential, that you are the whole package that we're looking for, because you're going to be competing with everybody else across the nation who is in that exact same boat and vying for a nomination from your representative in your district. All of these things are required in order to secure a spot at the Air Force Academy. Now, if you don't get the nomination, if you don't get into the academy, if you're too old, if you have dependents or something like that, if you have kids or a wife or somebody, then your opportunity to go to the academy has been missed. But that doesn't mean that you can't still become an officer. Other options that are available to you are the Reserve Officer Training Corps, or ROTC. There are 145 ROTC detachments across the nation at over 400 different universities. So there's plenty of opportunity for you there to still receive your officer training while you are going to school, so that you can receive your commission upon graduation. Now, let's say you missed the academy boat, you didn't know about ROTC, you're getting ready to graduate from college, and all of a sudden you're like, well, man, I really want to go join the Air Force. How can I still make this happen? At that point, you need to apply for what is called Officer Training School, or OTS. And through that, you can get your officer training in a 9-week block and receive your commission at that point. Then you're off into active duty. So those are your three options for becoming an officer: going to the Air Force Academy, joining Air Force ROTC, or Officer Training School.
Where can people find the information about what is required for each different commissioning source, the Academy, OTS, ROTC, and how they go about applying for each one of those?
Sure. So the official sources of information for the Academy are first going to be their website, usafa.edu. They've got an admissions page that you can read up on there, as well as you can get in touch with an admissions liaison officer, or ALO, not to be confused with other types of ALOs, right?
Yeah, of course, because we use the same acronym for different things all the time.
Exactly. And those individuals that are located across everywhere in the nation where there's a population center, there's going to be an assigned Academy ALO there. They can answer your questions. For Air Force ROTC, the best thing to do is to, one, you can go to their website, which is afrotc.com. But really the best thing to do is to go to the local Air Force ROTC detachment at the university in your area, or where you hope to attend, and talk to the recruiting officer. That officer will be able to give you all the information you need on how to get into their program, what the requirements are for eligibility, registering for classes, where you need to be when, what the program is structured like. They will be able to answer all of those questions for you. For Officer Training School, or OTS, you have to get in touch with an Officer Accessions recruiter. You can look those up by going to airforce.com and use the Find a Recruiter tool there. They are very difficult to get in touch with because they are incredibly busy. So those are the official sources for each of the different commissioning sources. But if I may, I'll put in the plug for my podcast, which is an unofficial source for all things becoming an officer, the training and development that we go through. It's called Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast, and we cover there every possible angle and pathway that you can think of about getting into the Air Force as an officer in any type of career field.
What is a good way, or I know you're on Instagram, what is the easiest way for someone to reach out to you and ask a question?
Yes, we're active on all the social media platforms, but probably the easiest, fastest way to get in touch with us is using our email, airforceofficerpodcast@gmail.com.
And so saying that, right, we have all these official sources. I will say one of the things I've learned in life is it's all about your network and who you know.
Sure.
You mentioned, right, like you and I talking about this, right? We've both been in the Air Force quite a while. We're both tied into the recruiting service. And this is even still a challenge to nail down exactly where you need to go with everyone. So when you're listening to this and you have someone out there, if you're trying to join the Air Force, I know specifically I had someone say they're a lawyer or they're going to graduate law school and they're trying to get in contact with the recruiter or they're not getting a lot of movement with it. One, yep, the recruiter could be busy. Two, there's a myriad of reasons why they might not be responsive. Like not saying sometimes like we just don't have a superstar in a position, right? They might not have the motivation. They might have stuff going on in life. They're all geographically separated. There's a lot of variables that go into it, not making an excuse, but nonetheless, that is a roadblock.
Right.
And it's just one more thing that you're going to have to just keep pushing through if you really want it. Like in the end if you really want it bad enough, and you might have to work harder for it than others, but just keep being persistent, keep looking for different avenues of attack. All right. You just hit on the 3 different commissioning sources. Again, those each have different criteria and different requirements, and it's a different fit for different people.
Right.
For instance, if you're the high school kid, look at the Academy ROTC. If you already have your degree, probably looking at OTS. But each one of those, again, they have a different process in order to get into it. You and I are both ROTC guys. What drives one person to another source versus, going ROTC versus going to the Academy? What are the pros and cons kind of between the different sources that you see?
Sure. So I think the main reason why somebody would choose to go to the Academy is because, one, they found out about it early enough that they were able to start making the steps that would enable them to get there. And then 2, they're looking for that specific type of college experience where they are in the military, getting their officer training at the same time as they are earning their academic degree. It is certainly not for everybody. So for someone who wants to go to the Academy is someone who learns about it early, is absolutely killing it in school. They're the whole package, and they're looking for that type of military training experience while they're going through school. Why would somebody choose ROTC versus the Academy? One, they're not looking for that type of military training experience while they're going through school. They want to be a typical college student. They want to live their life. They want to not be under the thumb. They want to have the freedom to go and do and enjoy lots of different opportunities, internships, a research fellow, or something along those lines. Maybe they want to get married. Maybe they already are married. Maybe they have kids. They want to have kids. Some of those things can determine that ROTC is going to be the better fit for you. And then for officer training school, the reason most people will end up there is because they didn't know about the other 2. It's not that there's anything wrong with officer training school. It's that it is far easier to get into the Academy or Air Force ROTC and earn your commission there than it is to get your commission through officer training school. Here's a case in point. One of the very recent selection boards for officer training school, so today is March 19th. The selection results for the recent board came out in February, and the selection rate was 2%.
That's crazy.
2%.
Yeah.
So getting into officer training school is incredibly competitive. And it's so competitive because most people don't find out about the Academy or can't get into it, or they don't find out about ROTC until it's already too late. They already have their degree or they're about to graduate. And so they choose to go the officer training school route. One caveat on that is our enlisted airmen or soldiers or sailors or Marines, since they can also receive commissions into the Air Force as well, is they're full-time active duty doing the job for the military. So they are unable to participate in the Academy or ROTC unless they leave active duty. They can be in the reserves or the Guard and do ROTC, or they can get a scholarship to go to the Academy so long as they meet those other requirements. But the vast majority of our enlisted won't be able to do the Academy or ROTC, and so they have to choose OTS.
Yeah. So my former superintendent, Master Sergeant Rich Hall, actually got picked up as a 37-year-old to go to OTS. So when we talk like OTS specifically, and that's when people ask me questions like, I'm just going to get my college degree and then apply to OTS. What I don't think they realize is the sheer number of people that are applying and the people they're applying against. For instance, people who already have been out in the workforce with their MBA, running a large department or group at a corporation and doing really well. And oh, by the way, they have a 4.0 GPA.
Mhm.
They're a very well-rounded person that has a lot of leadership skills in the civilian world that the Air Force is looking at that they're competing against. So,
Right.
if you just cruise through college and just or checking the boxes just to get done, it's going to be really tough to get that spot there.
And another thing to consider is that the number of spots available at the academy is static. It doesn't change from year to year. It's capped right at 1,000 per year. Will be able to go through the academy. ROTC is a little bit more flexible, but it's still somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 per year. But then OTS is the flexible partner that can grow and shrink to meet the Air Force's demands for officers. And it's also flexible not just in numbers, but in career fields. There may be boards where they only need maybe 100 pilots, whereas a year later, or it may be that they need 1,000. I don't know. The OTS exists in order to meet that gap that is left by the Academy and Air Force ROTC.
Yeah, I hate to put it this way, but I mean, it's more or less the Band-Aid each year to finalize the end state goal of officer accession. So it might be a really big Band-Aid or it might be a small Band-Aid in that year, and just kind of depends. Before we go too far, I kind of wanted to backtrack just a little bit as far as, one, we did mention ALO for getting into the Air Force Academy. So we're kind of talking about the 3 different commissioning sources, but how would someone go find that ALO, and what is that ALO going to do for them?
So you can find it through the Academy. That they will there's a tool there that you can use to get connected to the Academy liaison officer or ALO in your area, and that individual is going to talk with you about your experience, your grades, the things that you've been involved with, and give you a rough idea of how competitive you are in getting selected for the Academy. If they determine that you are competitive, or if you just want to go ahead and apply anyway and see what happens, that person will then help facilitate your application to be admitted to the Academy. They will guide you step by step through the process to make sure that you're crossing all of your T's, dotting all of your I's, making sure that everything is in place so that you can be selected for the Academy if you are competitive. So
interested in the Academy, the ALO, I think, is probably it's probably the second stop, obviously, after you go to the USAFA website and figure out what your requirements are. For ROTC, again, you kind of mentioned, hey, go to the ROTC unit that you're looking at joining. I went to Georgia Tech, and I think we had almost like 15 or 20 Crosstown Schools. Is like one of the largest Crosstown school components at the time. So can you talk a little bit about like what Crosstown Schools are? Because I think that could be applicable for someone who might not be going to such a large university.
Right. So a Crosstown School is a university that's in partnership with the host university where the Air Force ROTC detachment is actually located. Most of the classes and the training is going to be conducted at that host university. So, for example, I'm at Air Force ROTC Detachment 855, hosted by Brigham Young University. We have a crosstown with Utah Valley University. The 2 schools are 10 minutes apart, and so it makes it really easy for the students at UVU to drive over to BYU and receive their training. We do have classes on UVU campus on a regular basis, but the vast majority of the training actually happens at the host university. Now, that's not necessarily going to be the case for all universities, for all ROTC programs, because like you mentioned, there may be a detachment that has 30 different crosstown agreements with the universities in the area, and it's just not feasible to have classes in each of those different universities. And so the expectation is that you're going to commute the 10 minutes, the 30 minutes, the 90 minutes, depending on how far away you are, to receive your training based on when that host university is able to support that type of training.
Yeah. And for instance, I know Georgia Tech downtown Atlanta, there were several universities right around the corner where it was a 5 to 10 minute commute for those students. But then we also reached all the way to like West Georgia. So those students were commuting upwards of like 90 minutes each way. Now, granted, we're meeting like Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it's not every single day you're doing that. But then again, I would say if you're in an area and you're looking to go to a school that is probably on the smaller scale and they don't have ROTC, to look around geographically as far as like where the big school is, because most likely there's a chance there's a crosstown agreement for that. Do you agree?
But what I do want to say here is that there's no advantage to going to the host university over the crosstown university. We, the cadre, are going to treat every cadet, regardless of what institution they go to, just the same. So don't think that you have to go to the host university in order to get a leg up and be better treated or better valued or better evaluated by the ROTC cadre. That's just not true.
Yeah, that's a great point, because in the end, when I look at you or I look at another fighter pilot or I look whatever like your job is, my expectation is you do your job. Right. I don't care what you look like, who you like, anything like that. Is you show up, you do what is required of you, and you do it well. And then if you don't do it well, you identify that, fix it, press forward, and make it better for the next time. And that's great, because there probably is like, I can looking back on it, guys who are commuters, one, like you're commuting in and usually you're the outsider, just in the sense that everyone else is already there. They're in the dorms, they're eating dinner together, they're always hanging out. So just by the nature of it, they're friends, but that doesn't separate you from the herd, right? Like, you make it what it is, and show up, own it. And especially the cadre there, again, we're just looking for, I would say, winners, looking for leaders. It doesn't matter where you came from, again, what you look like, who you like, or anything like that. The expectation is that you're going to be a leader, to be a great officer in the Air Force.
Absolutely.
I think the Academy and ROTC are probably going to be fairly similar in the sense that they're more or less, there's some caveats to ROTC, but you're going to be enrolled in college for 4 years, and your military training is running concurrently through the Academy or through ROTC programs. At the end of your degree program, you're going to get your diploma and you're going to get your commission the same day or the very next day. While you're in the Academy, while you're in ROTC, you're learning, you're competing, and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do when you join, once you commission, go into the Air Force. Can you talk to me a little bit about the process, the timeline, as far as when people are going to get their jobs? If you want to be a pilot, what is that? What do you need to be doing to be a pilot, navigator, intelligence? What does all that look like?
Sure. So this is the point where my knowledge of how things operate at the Academy significantly drops off.
Yeah. Same.
I don't know exactly how they do their career field assignments, exactly at what point they apply for the rated board, or if they even have a rated board. We are working on our podcast to get that information put together and released, but I can definitely speak to the ROTC process. And I imagine that because the way that the Academy and the ROTC are set up, they're very similar, that what I say here about ROTC is going to be similar to what happens at the Academy, but I can't say it for certain. Okay.
Full disclosure, no one's going to sue you now.
And then the other thing that I want to say here is that the process that I described for ROTC is going to be the case for the vast majority of Air Force officers. Like I said earlier, the Academy only commissions about 1,000 a year. OTS, it's a flexible partner. It might be a whole bunch. It might be very, very little. So the vast majority of the line officers, which includes rated, the pilot, CISOs, ABMs, and RPA, are going to come through Air Force ROTC. So that all being said, let me describe how things work within Air Force ROTC. Once you have finished your first 2 years, or if you do a compressed schedule, your first year of ROTC, you are then moved into what is called the Professional Officer Course, or the POC. Once you are in the POC, it is at that point that you really start to get into the process of choosing which or having or applying for different officer career fields. Now, if you want to be a pilot or any other rated officer, that selection board is going to happen in the fall of your junior year or your 300 year. The board is going to take a look at all of your records, which includes your grades, your academic major, your commander's ranking, which is a description of your relative performance, your performance relative to your peers, as well as your physical fitness, your AFOQT scores, your PICSUM, the pilot candidate selection method if you're going for pilot, or other scores relative to the other rated career fields. The central selection board is going to look at all of this information, feed it into the gonculator, which is going to spit out a number that represents you. And if there are 500 slots available to ROTC cadets that year, 1 through 500 in that order of merit are going to receive a pilot slot. Then 501 and down won't. So it's a competitive thing that happens in the fall semester, and results are usually published around the end of February, March timeframe, specifically for rated selection. Now, the other career fields, that all happens the following year in your 400 year, and is pretty simple the way that works. The Air Force will say, based on your academic major, these are the career fields that you are eligible for. Number them of what your preferences are, and then the Air Force is going to match you to one of those career fields according to their needs. There are some career fields, like being an engineer, that require that you have a very specific degree, but there are a whole bunch of others that it doesn't matter what your degree is. And so that opens up the opportunity for you to do lots of different things, but it also gives the Air Force the ability to assign you into lots of different things.
This is another concept too that I think is foreign to people, but once you are kind of in the Air Force and you're used to being racked and stacked against your peers continuously. And correct me wrong, that really, I mean, it starts your freshman year.
It does.
Yeah. So, and by rack and stack, I mean, is if there's 10 people in your class, there's going to be a number 1 and there's going to be a number 10 on the commander's list. And that's a subjective rating that goes into part of the calculation down the road, but that same principle applies, day 1 of ROTC throughout your entire Air Force career. Everywhere you go, you're going to be racked and stacked against your peers. There's going to be a number 1 captain. There's going to be a number 1 flight lead. There's going to be a number 1 instructor. There's going to be a number 1 missileer, lawyer, doctor, whatever it is. And so it is just, as you mentioned earlier, it's a very competitive environment. And that is something to get used to, but people usually going to the Air Force were already kind of conditioned to it. And I would say it's slightly different in the sense, if you want to succeed at it, that you understand that process is going on, but that you kind of ignore it. At least that's my take on it. Like, it didn't matter to me, right? Like, I just wanted to be really, obviously you say the cliche things. I want to be the best officer, best leader. Really, I want to be the best pilot. All those things required me to do that. And the way I did that was to help out my peers, right? If I had some tidbit of information, if I had learned something, was to share that bit of information to help make the team better. Because in the end, the whole point of all of this is to be a team player and to go out there and win and fight our nation's battles.
Absolutely.
And so it seems like it's really far away, I think, when I'm saying something like that to a high schooler sitting in their bedroom or whatever, listening to this, but that's really not that far off. And that is the whole point. So everything you do should be geared towards the bigger picture, I think, of what am I doing today that is going to be impactful 5 years, 10 years down from the road, and what is going to be impactful on the larger scale of things, because you're joining an organization that's on the big scale. So we didn't really talk about OTS, and it's probably kind of a similar vibe. it's smoke and mirrors to me. Like, I don't know what they do at Maxwell and how they pick things, but it is kind of, they do have a board, right, that they're applying to get selected to go to OTS. And you know, they know going into OTS what career field they're going to go into, correct?
That is correct. Yes. So the way OTS works is, like I said earlier, you work with an officer recruiter that is going to guide you through the process, help you submit your package. And this is true whether you are a civilian or prior enlisted trying to go to OTS. You have to work with an officer recruiter. There are 4 OTS selection boards every year that will, and there will be a rated board and a non-rated board. The jobs available, the career fields available in each of those different boards is going to vary based on what the Air Force needs. And the specific degrees that the Air Force is willing to accept for those particular career fields may also vary. For example, space operations is a huge thing right now, right? Because we're trying to get
it's the future, they tell me. It's the future.
It is. The United States Space Force is trying to fill up with bodies and get to a point where they're fully up and operational. And in order to do that, they are being very picky about the types of degrees that they want to have in their space operations officers. So even though the Air Force Officer Classification Directory, now that's one that everybody's going to want to know, the AFOCD, may say that space operations can accept, any number of different degrees. The OTS selection process may limit those career fields by specific academic major. So like I said, there are 4 boards per year, rated and non-rated. Once you are selected, you will be told by your officer recruiter which career field you have been selected for. You're going to show up to officer training school knowing exactly what you're going to be upon graduation. You still have to wait for the actual class date itself, which can get pushed or canceled. I mean, you've been selected, so you're going to eventually go, but you don't know when. It may take a while. My co-host on our podcast, he went through officer training school, both as an OT, an officer trainee, as well, and he was there as an instructor. From the time that he completed his application to getting notified of selection was about 9 months. And then the time from officer being selected to showing up to OTS was about another 9 months. So this was a full up 18-month process getting him from being a civilian to finally showing up day 1 of training at officer training school. So anybody that's looking to go the officer training, the OTS route, should understand that not only is it extremely competitive, it can take a very long time.
The Guard and Reserve, those are avenues for people to commission into as well. Can
Correct.
you talk a little bit about how one would go about joining the reserves or joining the Guard and what that looks like?
Sure. So first off, commissioning out of Air Force Academy is into active duty only. Commissioning out of Air Force ROTC is into active duty by default, but you can sometimes find a way to get a commission through ROTC into the Guard or the Reserve. Very rare, but it does happen.
Good luck.
Right. More often than not, what is going to happen for I'll start with the Reserve, is that you will work with an officer sessions recruiter for the Air Force Reserve. And you'll go through that exact same process that I described earlier, and they are going to get you a class date and a career field for you to go through officer training school. And it is total force officer training school now. Everybody that's going to OTS, whether it's active, Guard, or Reserve, will go through the exact same training. Now, we haven't talked about the medical side. They're a completely different story. We can maybe address it another time. But line of the Air Force, rated, non-rated, they're going to go through the normal total force officer training school. Now, the Guard is a completely different animal. essentially your board for the guard is, does that commander have a spot for you to fill as an officer, and are they willing to send you and pay for you to go to officer training school? That's basically it. But where it sounds really simple, it's really not, because the guard really likes to hire from within. It's a very close-knit community that's extremely difficult to break into. So if you want to go the guard route, your best opportunity is to enlist and demonstrate as an enlisted airman that you are worth investing in, so that they can send you to officer training school and get your commission that way.
Yeah, I always kind of say the guard is almost like a fraternity or sorority. You got to
Yes.
you got to rush it, and then right place, right time. They happen to like you, and you have all the qualifications, and then they have a spot. Then you have a chance to do it. And that could take 6 months. That could take 3 years before you even get hired. So it could be a really long process. The one thing too, I really want people to take away that I've learned over the years is, I wouldn't say never take no for an answer, right? There's a line in the sand that you're just not going to be able to cross. I.e., like, I don't know, you have a valve that's closed in your heart. Like, you're probably not going to be commissioned to the Air Force. Like, there's just no overcoming that. But for most things, like, no is not always the final answer. And if it is no, like, somewhere there's an Air Force regulation that is the governing guidance. Right. And you need to see that and read it and know, like, yep, that is final, versus taking someone's word for it. There's an appropriate way to do it, and there's some finesse to do it, but educate yourself, use your network and leverage that. And I'll say, I had a buddy who started day one ROTC with me. He did his first semester and they kicked him out, said he had asthma. Fast forward 5 years later, because I had to wait 18 months to go to pilot training, I show up to Columbus Air Force Base, and Brian is on the computer next to me checking into pilot training. He had gotten hired by a reserve unit to fly C-130s. Turns out he didn't have asthma. He had it all cleared up. So it's like, for him, it was crushing. Like, that was his only dream. And had he just stopped right there and saying, like, I'm done, like, it'd have been over. So sometimes no is the final answer, but again, educate yourself, make sure you do it. So just know it's a process. And as we kind of alluded to in the beginning, like, you and I are heavily involved in the Air Force, right? We're getting paychecks from the Air Force, and even to us with our networks and the people we know, it can be really frustrating, but in the end, it is such a rewarding career. At least for me, if I had to go back over and do it all over again, I would absolutely do it, just because of everything I've gotten out of it. There's definitely frustrations that come with it, but it's been pretty good to me. Before we wrap up, I do just want one kind of like final parting shot across the bow.
Sure.
We talked about those commissioning sources. One thing I just want to like allude to, some of the specialty things such as doctors, lawyers, nurses to a certain degree, I think.
Yep.
That's different, right? They have a lot more schooling and different
totally different.
Yeah. What do doctors and lawyers and things like that need to do in order to join the Air Force, or just broad brush? What are we looking at?
The simplest way to put it is, it's complicated.
I was gonna say, if you said it depends, you'd have been it. It'd have been the win.
It depends.
Yeah. There you go. Okay.
The thing to do if you want to be a physician or a lawyer or a chaplain, any of those non-line, very special, what we call professional career fields for the Air Force, is to get in touch with a recruiter, either an officer recruiter for OTS or a recruiting officer for ROTC. They don't commission non-line out of the academy, so don't even worry about that. So get in touch with one of those official sources, or if you want to, you can reach out to me or my co-host Reed. Again, Air Force Officer Podcast at gmail.com, and we will do our best to point you towards the resources needed to explain the Health Profession Scholarship Program, the United Services University of the Health Sciences, or any other number of resources to help you get some information on how to become a non-line physician or lawyer or chaplain or something like that.
Well, Colin, before we split ways here, is there anything else you'd like to throw out there to the audience about becoming an officer, or tips, tricks, advice?
The main thing that I want to say is that being an officer is freaking awesome, but it's also freaking hard.
Yeah.
It's it is a wonderful way of life. It is a very difficult way of life. It is not for everybody, but for those who are able to do it and do it well, it is extremely rewarding. It is by far one of the best things that I've ever done in my life. And my personal experience was that I served my 4-year commitment, and then I left. I separated from active duty. I went into the non-participating IRR, or individual ready reserve, meaning I wasn't doing anything with the Air Force. And I missed it like crazy. I missed my tribe. I missed wearing the uniform and being with my brothers and sisters in arms. And so I did everything that I could to find a way back. I had to figure it out. I had to become really smart on the process. I mean, I was already an officer at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to get really smart on the process. I had to leverage my network. I had to demonstrate that I had the capability and the willingness to be successful in the thing that the Air Force needed me to do. And that's how I got to Air Force ROTC. I am so grateful for the time that I've had as an officer, which is one of the reasons why and so grateful for my time as an instructor in Air Force ROTC, which is one of the reasons why I decided to start the podcast, Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast, so that I could share this information with my audience, with your audience, with anybody out there that is looking to go into this type of career field.
Colin, that's awesome. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Again, more information, Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. That's a great source and a way to get more information about the various different career fields, becoming an Air Force officer, et cetera, and then able to reach out to you, a current ROTC instructor. So great resource there. Thanks again for coming on the podcast and taking the time to join us here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave. That way you don't miss any content that comes out. Be back next week with my guest, Daniel Bond Robinson, who's a former Tornado pilot. He was the first exchange pilot in the F-22 program and is the founder of Red 6 Aerospace. He has